Welcome to TechCabal Live. We have this event over time and we have it on different days, and we talk about issues affecting the African tech ecosystem. And it's an exciting way for all of us to put our heads together and find new ways for businesses to run, for people to find funding, just many things like that. So our guest, we have Marley Diallo. She's the CEO of BRT Energy, and BRT Energy is very focused on regeneration of lead acid batteries. That's a primary goal, and they do a lot of other storage management services from telcos to businesses looking to store energy in batteries, which is a key part of what we are talking about here. Being able to use renewable energy requires you to be able to store it somewhere, and batteries play a huge role there. So Marley Diallo will be joining us. Then we have Christian Wessels. He's the co-founder of Daystar Power, and they focus on hybrid solar power to use to power commercial and industrial customers across West Africa. And of course, their objectives are to reduce energy costs by 20 to 30% and provide stable power at 99% uptime. So welcome, Christian. Welcome, Marley. And finally, we have Dr. Wiebe Boer. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Allon. And he joined the team from the Boston Consulting Group, where he was one of the founders of the strategy firm's Lagos office. Allon is very focused on financing businesses that are looking to help the energy situation in Africa. So from solar home systems to people just battery generation, things like that. His company Allon is very focused on helping people do that. So before we get into the rest of the event, we're going to have Michael Famarotti, Chief Economist at Stairs Data, who will be giving an opening presentation today on the future of energy in sub-Saharan Africa. Please, I'd like to welcome Michael Famarotti.
Hi, Edwin. Thank you very much.
Hi, Michael.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. I believe I'm allowed to start now.
Yes, you are.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Edwin. Pleasure to be here. Good morning to everyone. Morning to all the panelists. And yes, thank you very much, TechCabal, for inviting Stairs and myself to the program. So I'll just be very quick because I just have about 10 minutes, and the much wiser heads will then be given a chance to speak. As like them, I'm not exactly an industry expert. However, the background for this conversation is that about 18 months ago, TechCabal and Stairs decided to do deeper analysis into what we consider to be one of the most interesting emerging industries on the continent, which is off-grid renewable energy. The goal at the time was to take an Africa-wide focus for a couple of reasons. The first thing is, as you may notice from the moderators, even when you look at policy and operators, the most common lens adopted is an African or regional lens. The market attractiveness is, I guess, heavily improved when you look at things from a regional perspective, but at the same time, a lot of the issues are common across at least the SSA region. So that was a key motivation for why we broadened our lens a bit to look at it from a sub-Saharan Africa perspective. As part of the report, we spoke to a lot of stakeholders. Generally, our approach was engaging with experts from different countries, yes, but also engaging with people and firms working across different solutions. Right? So you have C&I solar like Daystar, you have household solar systems, you also have wind mini grids, biomass, and so on. There's a lot of diversity of solutions being deployed across the continent. And while there are commonalities, each solution and each country has unique issues that we wanted to try and pull out by engaging with experts in the ecosystem. When all was said and done, the final report has a clear narrative. And we started from understanding the way people use electricity in the region. Because ultimately, the final consumer, be it an individual, a household, or a firm sits at the center of the industry and sits at the center of any ideas or policies that are created to drive growth here. So in trying to understand adoption of these solutions, we first started off by understanding the way energy is used on the continent. And then we moved on to try and create a case for why off-grid solutions are a critical part of the way forward, right? Because when you think about it, yes, we're all aware that there's an energy gap on the continent, but there are many ways that can be addressed. One of the ways that was very much in vogue in the 80s and 90s was just, expand the grid, right? And let everybody have access to the national or regional grid. So one of the things this report tried to do is justify why that slow shift away from that type of thinking has been an important driver or for lighting of the continent in the last 10 years. So building off the motivation for off-grid solutions, we then honed in across the different countries, across different solutions on what are the main drivers of adoption. The goal really there is to give operators, policymakers, investors, and any stakeholder really a very good sense of, okay, across markets and solutions, what are the themes that I can point out and look for that give me insights and can even predict how successful and how quick certain countries will adopt particular solution, right? So that was ultimately the goal of the project and report. And like I've seen Daniel put on the chat, that report is available on the TechCabal, I guess, Shopify platform. Now, just talking about what we came to look at today, and I'll just spend about maybe 5 minutes on that. One of the key factors that were identified when we looked at adoption in the continent is liquidity. And we can look at liquidity from the supply side in terms of them actually getting funding or financing to deploy solutions. But I'm going to steer away from that because I know that I have on the call again people that are better equipped to touch on that. So I'll focus more on liquidity from the demand perspective, which is, to what extent do consumers have the money to pay for these solutions? And that's a challenge that is still being resolved. And I'm going to touch on it from 3 different ways, right? There's an income issue, there's a collection issue, and then there's a credit issue. From the income side, I probably don't need to say much here, right? Lots of Africans are poor. Just taking 2 big markets on the continent, Nigeria and South Africa, both of those countries have rates of unemployment around 30%. So that gives you a sense of the income generating capacity of the workforce of those countries. The second thing that I'll point out is when you look at the rate of subsidization of grid power on the continent, that far surpasses anything that you see across the world. Now, the consequence of that is grid power is often cheaper than, or it's often priced below cost in different parts of the continent. Now, despite that, you still have an issue where people cannot afford to pay for power. Right? So that again just puts the income leg into perspective. The reality though is that this income issue is an underlying economic problem. Right? So for the energy industry, the best that can be done is first of all trying to innovate around it. And because of how energy can actually increase people's long-term income, the best solutions are those that don't just focus on how they can provide power to people now, but design solutions to identify how they can provide power to people, and that power increases their income generating potential and their ability to afford power in the future, right? So that's a very big part of the income leg. When we look at collection, collection is actually probably the most varied problem, but what it comes down to is even when people can pay for the power that is generated or used, that money doesn't always flow to the power provider. Now, this can range from just people vandalizing meters. It can also be an access problem where somebody, needs to pay for the power used on their solar system, and the closest point of payment is in a different town. Now that creates a level of friction that can actually be quite fatal to providers of power in rural parts of the region. So in terms of collection, when we look at it from a solutions perspective, again, the best solutions are those that are explicitly addressing collection challenges in that particular country or region. And a very good example is how pay-as-you-go solar providers embedded mobile money into their solutions in East and West Africa, right? Again, that's played a very big role in them addressing the collection problem. The final leg in terms of this liquidity challenge is credits. Now, again, I'll be very brief on credits. There is a large credit gap on the continent. Just as a reference, MSMEs in Africa receive about $70 billion of credits each year, but the credit gap is estimated at close to 400 billion, right? So there is a large gap. Now, there are two main reasons for why a credit gap might exist, right? One is an information problem, where the credit provider doesn't have the information on the risk worthiness of the borrower, be that a business or an individual. The other problem is that the credit transaction is actually not value adding because the user funds will not create enough value to pay back the debt. Now, the information asymmetry problem is being addressed by existing solutions. We've already spoken about pay-as-you-go solar, but on the finance side, generally, there's a lot of consumer credit solutions that have been created in the last 5 years on the continent. The important one that people are still wrapping their heads around is the second leg, where as a provider of credits or solar solutions per se, I need to ensure that the user of energy actually is going to use it in a way that is of economic value to them and to society. Very simple example, just to wrap this up, is when we look at mini grids. They are being deployed at a good pace in rural parts of the continent. And at first, when it came to determining locations, operators or providers focused on actual demand for power, right? So they will look at people in a, say, 10-mile radius and estimate how much power they use and decide if that is a value-adding region to install a mini grid. Now, the problem with that approach is that it does not acknowledge the uniqueness of energy as both a consumer good and a capital good, right? Where it essentially allows people to generate greater value from their income generating activities. So what providers have now moved to, as I round up is an estimated demand approach, where they're looking at demand in a 10-mile radius, not just in terms of actual demand, but thinking about different ways that if they provide power in this area, that people could then use it for income generating means, right? So what you then find is that estimated demand is often a lot higher than the actual demand and gives a better picture of the attractiveness of a certain region for mini grids, right? So that's in a nutshell, just sort of illustrates the sort of credit problem that we face and how it can be addressed. So just to round up again, the report itself goes beyond financing and looks at issues like regulation, culture, and so on. But when it comes to the liquidity problem, the three main legs that we've identified that I would like to hear a lot more on today are, dealing with income and credit, but also dealing with collection losses, which are still quite high on the continent. The report is available online, like I said, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was very informative. I think all of us today would, definitely love to get our hands on that report. I have seen it, and honestly, it helped me, get a deeper understanding of the actual problem we have. So, for example, I don't know if you guys can hear the noise, but my generator is running, so it kind of buttresses our point here, where there's no electricity, and we need to find lasting solutions to it. To also still talk about the report. There's a quote on the report that really, pushes what we're trying to discuss today. So close to 50% of sub-Saharan Africa, or more than 50% of sub-Saharan Africans do not have access to electricity. And truth is, if we have almost 500 million people without access to electricity, we are not going to go far as a region if we do not have electricity. Is quite basic in the grand scheme of things that we need to achieve. So thank you so much for that. For the event, we'll begin our conversation with where you can drop questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom channel, of course. So, to begin, I would want to go right into asking our speakers, so for example, if I had to start a renewable energy company, I could describe today as the reason why I started my own, because this generator noise is, it's painful. But I want to ask each of us what made you say, you know what, this is something I need to focus, like this becomes the work I do with my life. I'll start with Mali.
So yeah, I mean, like you might know, I was not initially working in the energy sector. I started my career in the fintech and the banking industry, but I've been pretty lucky to travel all around Africa and to several countries, and each country had his issues when it comes to energy in general, and it's something that I witnessed, I would say. And at some point I just look at it and I was like, okay, I need to know, try to understand more about what is basically causing those, what is the root of those energy issues, because you have all those big electricity company, I mean national electricity companies that are most of them generated from the colonial time, but I've noticed there was no improvement sometime in the infrastructure, and I mean your cities have become more and more populated, meaning that you have the infrastructure that don't fit with the population, basically. So why I came into this is like, I was like, yeah, we cannot move economically, I mean, the continent if we don't have energy. I mean, we're talking about a lot of people, yes, half of the population doesn't have access to regular electricity, but we need electricity for industries, we need electricity for corporate. I mean, electricity is the base of everything. So, I mean, thinking about it, I just decided to do a deep analysis of the market. I'm a very curious person, and I mean, since I've been like this since my childhood. So I've done a deep analysis of the market, and I realized that we were, in the case of Nigeria, where I've been to Nigeria twice. I mean, generator is the norm. Ghana was not. Ghana is pretty different. Guinea, where I'm from, is pretty different, and I realized that we need solar energy. Is something that that is booming, obviously, in the continent. I was familiar with solar energy because when I was going to Guinea in vacation, my dad installed solar panels in our village because we didn't have access to the grid. But you need solar, you need batteries, you need to store this energy. But batteries, how can you access to battery, and how can you make this efficient and cost effective? So this is why I came across the battery regeneration, and I did, like I said, market analysis, try to understand how we can make a difference there, because it's good to have a solar panel and so forth, but solar panel are usually, you can use them for 20 years, maybe, if you're lucky. But the batteries, because of the weather condition, the temperature, the batteries cannot be, need to be replaced quite often in our environment. So how can you make access to electricity cheaper for people if you have to replace all the accessories
batteries often, yeah,
and all those components, because people don't have access to that. So basically, why I came to battery regeneration is because everyone uses Everyone uses batteries. Your generators that you have home has a battery, a lead acid battery.
yeah.
So at some point, I'm pretty sure that you have to pay $1,000 or $800 to replace the battery. What if you can have this battery regenerated, reduce the pollution, avoid the pollution, because there's this thing related to the when you throw away the batteries, and we don't recycle. Recycling is not massive. Is not massive in Africa yet. So
yes, definitely.
Yeah, this is I connected the dots. And at some point, I realized that I needed to align this business idea with the SDGs, the United Nations SDGs.
Sustainable Development Goals. Yes,
Exactly.
definitely. I do agree that we don't have as much of a recycling culture here, and so this in many ways, renewable energy is a two-parter in my opinion. We are trying to preserve our planet and also provide accessible energy for people. I would throw this to Dr. Wiebe Boer now. All on is very focused on financing companies who are, helping to build the renewable energy sector in Africa. So, what would you say is the company's raison d'etre? Why are we in this? Why is All On in this?
Okay, yeah. So All On was actually started and funded by Shell. As a way to give back to Nigeria. So the way that Shell has funded it is it's in a structure that no matter how much money Shell puts in, they actually don't get any return. And so what that means is, as an investor, we can be a pure impact investor because we don't have to, add a kind of margin on what we're expecting to pay back our investors. But basically, what Shell's focus was, look, this is a major development problem in Nigeria. In fact, the foundational development problem, and it's also very adjacent to what they were doing as an oil and gas company in Nigeria. And so that was the Shell reason for setting it up. My personal reason for coming and joining them was, I was born and raised in Nigeria. My first early years were actually spent in a village in what is now Taraba State that was completely off grid, and then eventually moved to the big city of Jos, where through my lifetime we kind of saw how the power sector got worse and worse and worse, right? So in the early years you just kind of got used to it and you managed, and then eventually you had to get a generator, and then it got worse and worse till the point where really we were just basically depending on generators. It's the story that kind of everyone my age in Nigeria lived through. And what it has come to is that if you look at any of the social economic sectors or indicators in Nigeria, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's competitiveness, anything you look at, our indicators are relatively poor. And if you look at what the foundational reason for that is, it's because we don't have reliable power. And so, my career has been very focused on that impact, on impact. And if you can put a lot of money into education, you can put a lot of money into health, all sorts of other things. But if you don't address power first, you can't really transform those other sectors. And so when basically when I was headhunted by Shell to start this, I at first thought it was a joke because it just seemed too good to be true. We're putting all this money into a fund. We want you to come and run it. And I was just like, no way. And so immediately it was obviously something I jumped for. So I think it was where it kind of the objectives of the company and the objectives of me as an individual for my career kind of really meshed, and it's been a great decision and a great great story since then.
Christian, so you co-founded Daystar Power, and so far you've raised money to continue expanding across West Africa, and I do want to know, like, it's a two-parter in a way. I want to know why you got into it, and what are some things you've noticed, have been some challenges with expanding across West Africa in that way.
Very good. No, thank you, Edwin. Thank you, everybody, for having me. So how did I get into this? I spent the last 15 years working in Africa, initially actually rolling out branches, expanding infrastructure for Barclays Bank in roughly 10 countries, then as a consultant, analyzing often their performance and cost data, then working for a larger industry actually in Nigeria. And along this entire journey of me working in Africa, the topic of power was a very big one. Because either case A, Nigeria, there is no power, and whatever we were doing, we had to plan for self-generating power, diesel generator. If we were lucky, we were at a gas pipeline. Or in other West African countries where there is power, but this power is very expensive. And so it was a big topic for us. And when we then started thinking about alternatives ourselves, we were inviting other companies into Nigeria back in the days to present solutions. We already understood that solar plus batteries, solar plus batteries plus, for instance, still backup generators could be part of the solution. And we figured out that the companies that were visiting us, they were offering in principle very complicated solutions. We didn't even understand what they wanted to do with us, but we understood that the promise was something like, on this factory, we built a large solar power plant, and by God's grace, in 10 years, that makes financially sense for you. And we will fly in whenever there is a problem. And that was the starting point where we thought maybe we found ourselves a company, and my co-founder and I, Jasper Graf von Hardenberg, we founded Daystar Power, then with the idea, in our case, to focus on commercial and industrial customers so that Daystar provides them with cheaper electricity, so below the not only effective rate that is grid plus diesel in Nigeria, but really below the grid rate. Secondly, more reliable. And thirdly, clean energy. So we like to reduce as much as possible the consumption of diesel generators. And with this in mind, it has been a great journey since 2017. We have now 110 colleagues who are working in Nigeria, but also Ghana, Senegal, Ivory Coast. We have more than 240 systems that we are currently running. So the combination of doing actually something that provides cost savings and is clean energy and it's easy to be implemented has actually worked. But I would like to say something also that Wiebe mentioned actually. I think it's all around having an ecosystem. And when I got this invitation for this call, I understood it's not about me presenting Daystar Power. I mean, I love what we're doing and I love our team. Yeah. So it's a fantastic experience. But I think it's around the ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, because in the audience, there will be other entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, people who have maybe great ideas. I just want to say, think about it like this. We are like in the midst of a revolution in energy that goes from central to decentral, that goes from fossil to renewables, that goes from kind of primitive to tech-enabled. So, and I think there, and I'm sure also Mali and Wiebe will comment on it, but I think it's worth highlighting. It's not so much that there's one company like ours who are doing a okay, good job, But I think there's an ecosystem that is evolving where, for instance, Wiebe plays an amazing role, in my opinion, where there are opportunities for just so many other people to actually also invest their time and money.
All right. Thank you for that. I actually love that you mentioned that this is about us building an ecosystem, because the truth is, this is not a solution. This is not a problem that will be solved with maybe 2 or 3 big, renewable energy companies. It's a lot, because the truth is that the problem is large. There are rural communities that are completely off grid. Not even, some people have access to the grid, but not enough electricity. But some people just have no access at all, and so it takes a lot of us creating solutions like this. And so that brings me to the next thing I want to talk about. And I think I'll probably start with Mali. What are some unique in building your company, trying to get into the space where you're convincing people to, save these batteries, reuse their batteries, basically opt for something that is better for the planet, but also better for everybody. So what are some challenges you faced in your journey?
So yeah, I would say that first of all, it hasn't been a straight journey, and it wasn't easy to convince people that that they have something that they are kind of used to throw away and that they are used to buy on a regular basis, that we can keep what they currently have, make them savings, and also increase their positive environmental impact. So I will be honest with you that the idea of setting up this startup has been here for more than 5 years when it comes to me, and I took the time to do the market analysis and try to understand who were the main user of the batteries. And telcos are large user of batteries, and the backup energy is a big challenge especially in some countries where the regulator asks the telco to make sure that the service is available, that the availability of the service is there. So it was pretty challenging to convince people, but I can tell you that I've talked to professionals, I talked to people who at the end understood the benefit of offering this service. And at the end, I've been able to set up a joint venture with local partners, because people locally always understand the reality of the market. And so far, we're doing well, but it's a journey. But what I would say to any entrepreneur is to make sure that you understand you understand your market, first of all, that you learn about what you want to do, what you want to do exactly, and also that you need to learn how to pitch your idea to people. Some will get it, some won't, but if you have people, one out of 10% that understand what you're doing, you can move forward.
Great. I love that, because I think of these conversations as I would want anybody in the audience who is looking to help solve this in probably your town or your city, come here and hear ways to get there. But there is a prevailing issue with people getting funds, because the truth is, with a lot of companies like renewable energy companies, you need funds to get the materials, the solar panels, all these things, before you even build your own infrastructure. So I want to start with Wiebe on how can companies get access to funding. I know Olon has a lot of many ways to fund, from ideation to later stage, but I do want to find out, what are your thoughts on ways entrepreneurs today who are passionate about joining the renewable energy ecosystem, how do they do that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. Okay.
No problem.
Obviously, that's a big question, but I think it's really the same answer to a startup in any sector in Nigeria and Africa. Obviously, don't go to the commercial banks; they won't fund you, so don't waste your time. Just like any sector, any early stage company in any sector, but especially a nascent one like this, obviously the first funding you get is from friends and family. Don't try and go start fundraising before you have any kind of real product or anything to really present to an investor that's tangible. There are some programs for companies at the ideation stage. Some of them are ones we fund through the Clean Tech Hub in Abuja and the Nigeria Climate Innovation Center in Lagos. And there's other such programs that other donors and investors are doing and setting up. So there's that to tap into for that sort of early stage incubation support, and then a little bit of initial funding. But for the most part, if you're a company in this space, you really need a bootstrap at the beginning and come up with something tangible and innovative that investors will be ready to invest in. We then also invest at the angel stage, so we can do a sort of a debt as small as $50,000, which then really helps a company. Let's say you're trying to do your first mini grid, or you're trying to bring in your first kind of consignment of solar home systems to bring into the market, or something like that. You can then get that funding, which we actually do in partnership with a U.S. government agency called the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, which they match our $50,000 of debt with $50,000 of grant money, which obviously is a big help, because then the grant money is sort of is basically risk-free, and then between that and the debt, then you can really kind of use that first 100K to build something realistic. Then you just have to make sure that you use that funding really well, or that type of funding really well, and build something that you can actually now prove to the rest of the market that you are ready to go, right? So if you get 100K like that at that stage, or even the 10K that you get at an earlier stage, and in a year you're now coming back to the market and saying, oh yeah, I still just have an idea on paper, or I use the money to buy a car, and an office space, and rent a new house, but I now need more money so I can do the actual mini grid. I mean, you're going to be dead on arrival. Obviously, no one is going to trust you. On the flip side, if you use that money wisely, then investors will be very ready to do more. So in those angel investments that we do, there's one company called Oxano, that in 2018 we invested just that 50K with the 50K from USADF. They used it to upgrade and automate some of their assembly line for their solar panel manufacturing here in Lagos. 2 years later, we put $1.5 million in them because we trusted them, and they proved themselves so ready to deliver and execute that it gave us the faith to now give them that extra money. Others that we did that same investment in 2018 are still talking stories, right? Obviously, those guys are never going to get money from us, and they will never get money from any other investor, because any investor will ask us, why are you not investing in them more, right? And so it really is about making sure that right from the beginning you're credible, right from the beginning you deliver, even if it's small, but you deliver and you execute and you prove that you can do this, so that then investors like us will then have the ability to give you more money and more money, so that you can grow and scale and eventually become the size of Christian's company.
Which is a perfect segue for Christian to tell us about what have been the challenges we've had with what would you say actually to people, because you talked about an ecosystem. So I know you're primarily talking to corporate and industrial companies, but I do want to find out, what do you think in the general sense of things does a company need to know and have before expanding? And you've expanded across West Africa, so I want to know what are your thoughts on doing that as a young company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I would say that we have to really look at some fundamentals. The fundamentals are that a relatively tested technology has become incredibly more affordable, and that's kind of PV, photovoltaic, solar. So we wouldn't be sitting here 10 years ago. And then on top of it, energy storage, something that Mali knows a lot of, also gets cheaper. So, and with this, almost every 6 months, 12 months, the equation changes in favor of actually using solar power as opposed to, for instance, or renewable power as opposed to fossil fuels. And on the back of this, there are a couple of interesting applications. There's number one, simply saying, okay, there have to be then companies who know how to design, to install, and to maintain these systems. So think about it like this. There is an army of people in Nigeria that know very well how to repair a diesel generator. Now, good news is the solar system is by far less prone to damage or to being maintenance heavy. But there have to be people who understand this. But then it's not only about hardware, it's also about really the software. Think about the management of these systems. So in Nigeria, you would typically still have a hybrid system where you basically have solar plus grid plus something else. So there needs to be kind of a management system that you can either buy, but definitely there's room for tech companies who are providing more, for instance, monitoring. So we work with fairly young companies actually in our extensive monitoring systems across West Africa. There's a whole topic around payments. So the ecosystem provides actually different opportunities to get engaged, or think about the different client segments. So we do blue chip companies. So that's wonderful, but that's part of the story only. That's not everything. You know, there's medium-sized companies, small-sized companies, residential, and so on. So from that perspective, I think mapping out the market would be really interesting, and feeling where in this relatively new industry for Nigeria, there are opportunities. When it comes then to how to go about it, Wiebe has said a couple of important points. I mean, the first thing is, like in any other business, you need to be well prepared and very quickly move from theoretical concept to having something to show, kind of a viable product. And that doesn't need to be complicated. When we started, we had 1 or 2, 3 systems. I'm sure when I met first Wiebe on the topic of solar, I'm sure we didn't have more than 10, 20 systems or so. Now, so you have to really move very quickly. And then, you know, put your bets wisely. You know, it is really regretful that, you know, even up to today, I can say Nigerian banks, for instance, play 0 role in our financing. Yeah, I mean, that's not great, actually, you know, because we don't like the idea that we, as a Nigerian West African company, you know, that we are essentially getting money mainly from overseas, you know, and I mean, thanks God we get the money, but you know, why? You know, why is it that we need to tap into European DFIs or international investors so predominantly, when actually locally there is liquidity available, and what we're doing is actually amazing. So we provide solar power, reduced costs to people who would anyhow pay for the cost, and they all have an amazing credit rating. So why would, the reason is that Nigerian banks still focus on the top 100 customers in the country, and the rest is not so relevant. So that everybody has to bear in mind. Just as one last tip, I would say. So I would say it's really this endurance and this tenacity that we had to apply is really remarkable. And I can tell you, I can sleep very well tonight. But you know, there's one thing that I shouldn't be doing. I shouldn't be thinking about how narrow it was partially when you found your own company. Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I get nervous. I'm not nervous anymore, but I get, in hindsight, nervous how much risk we were taking. Yeah, how we were then actually dependent on those people who helped us, you know, with good advice, or really then also with financial means. So in the end, we all managed. But I would say, you know, the courage I wish to everybody to get into this, because ultimately there's a big market to get.
There is. Thank you so much for that. And you mentioned something important about how, and this I think cuts across the entire tech ecosystem here, where a lot of the funding seems to come from, you know, outside of Africa, you know, and it then brings us to an important part of this, where I want us to look at, there are countries who have set up, you know, basically funds or grants or whatever it is to help renewable energy companies, but the truth is, in the reality, there are not a lot of these being used. A lot of companies are not getting funded. So I do want to find out from you if there are any, you know, have you seen any progress? Have you seen any, you know, glimpse of hope, something that says, oh, there might be something here in terms of government policy or infrastructure that could help companies like this? I'll start with Mali, because I remember you mentioned doing some work with the Rwandan government, who are very serious about green energy and, you know, trying to see if, you know, we can work together. So have you seen any other progressive thinking in terms of African governments helping out with renewable energy?
Yeah, I would say, and I will repeat again that I do consider Rwanda as a model when it comes to green energy. I mean, they've set up the Rwandan Green Fund for Nerwa for some reason, and they are funding projects which are more or less mature and also at the starting, more or less also at the starting level. But what I can say when it comes to the financing, and like Wiebe say, at the beginning, when you start your business, you rely on personal fund, on friend, and so forth. And something that I, as an entrepreneur, I faced is the fact that you need to prove your concept. You need to go for pilot to get customers, because whenever you want to apply for funding or funding from DIF, external funding, because there's a lot of organizations that offer grants for startups. They will ask you 3 years of a financial statement. They will ask you a lot of information that when you start you don't really have. So I qualified, I mean, with BRT for some program, but when we come to the stage where they were like, okay, we need to have your financial statement and so forth, I couldn't produce anything because we are still starting, and it's one challenge that we have faced, and we are still at this stage where we will rely on external funding. Sorry, and we need to have signed customer. Customer to show that we have some kind of activities. So yes, I can say that there are some governments who are pushing for green energy to be used locally. But when it comes to the funding, the reality is that you need to make sure that what you are pushing in the market is adopted by the market, and that you can start invoicing, because
So,
that's the reality.
the market should determine,
Yeah,
the market
that's
tells them what.
reality.
Okay.
I mean, and I'm talking about my story, but that's a reality.
All right. Wiebe, where would you weigh in here? Do you see a lot of your companies that you funded, do you see a lot of them getting any extra help from the government in terms of policy or infrastructure or even funds?
Yes, definitely. So the renewable off-grid energy space is actually probably one of the few sectors that this particular administration has supported in a very consistent and very coherent manner. And this includes good regulation. I mean, to the point where, on the weekly radio show I do on this, I've had guests from, Cambodia, India, Kenya, Rwanda, even South America, that they say they look to what Nigeria has done with mini grid regulations and such, and that it's actually an example that they follow. This is not something we hear of very often, so it's something that we definitely need to celebrate. In addition, the government has also gone beyond that to actually put funding, it's a subsidy funding for both solar home system and mini grid providers, in the form of a $500 million facility from the World Bank and the African Development Bank for results-based grants. So basically, you have to put up the mini grid. It has to be operating for a certain period, and then you get the sort of 30% grant rebates, similar for the solar home system companies. So this obviously then helps make these companies more bankable. The only problem is that on the reverse, then all of these companies, when they're importing products into Nigeria, they get the normal shakedown at the port. They get the, sort of unpredictable and random, taxes that are charged that you weren't expecting. So one shipment can come in and they say, oh, it's solar products. There's no VAT. There's no nothing. Bring it in. And then the next one, it's like 30, 40%. And you actually can't predict what it will be right at that particular time. So in some ways, it's like you have these great policies and these great support programs from the center, and then you get at the sort of entry level, then you get that sort of, it's almost like then that's taken away. So there has to be a way to balance that. The government has also included this really ambitious program to get 5 million solar connections within 5 years as part of kind of the post-pandemic revival plan. And the central bank is providing 180 billion nairas worth of very low cost debt to companies that have a certain level of local content, to kind of now also help them with their growth and expansion. Obviously, any government program, there are some limitations, some specifics that you have to qualify for. But for the most part, I don't know of any other country, certainly in West Africa, that's providing that much kind of dedicated support to the sector. So it's something that we as investors and so on obviously are very, very pleased with. The only issue is that beyond the issue at the ports is that they're pretty focused on just solar home systems and just mini grids. So that kind of subsidy isn't available for what Christian is doing, even though his company is also taking a big risk in much of what they do. It's also not available for other sort of segments of the sector that are kind of being developed in Nigeria, like the solar energy system sector, or cold storage, or battery as a service, like what Marley is doing. And so, these programs are so kind of focused on just two segments of the sector. And then other segments are sort of trying to figure out, oh, wait, why are we being left out, and where do we fit in? So again, it's great. There are room for improvement, but look, it's in the context that we're in, we can't really complain. And it's something that the companies, across our portfolio are really benefiting from.
Audience, if you have any questions, because we'll be moving to our Q&A very soon. I know Marley and Wiebe have been answering a couple of them. I think Christian as well. So they've been answering some questions, but of course we'll answer some of them live. So please keep asking your questions in the Q&A box. Christian, I'll then move to you. I saw you nodding when Wiebe mentioned how companies like yours are not really put into consideration when it comes to these policies. So what's been your experience with policies and infrastructure?
Mm-hmm. Although we have not benefited from a government program, I really would like to concur with Wiebe that these programs that are focused on mini grid, respectively residential application, are very important for the country, and I think are quite remarkable. The fact that we as a company are not benefiting from it doesn't change my opinion that I would really like to say congratulations, well done on launching these initiatives. When it comes to regulation, the sector that we are playing in, and again, that's industrial, and we are now rolling this year the first projects up to 2 megawatt for industrial users. Then in these markets, we have to go through certain permits that have a very clearly structured approval process. We do not believe we are constrained by policies. I think the processes that they are clearly defined, they have been explained to us. So therefore, there is no burden on us. There's no obstacle for us in growing. And for us, frankly, that's the most important. So in the market that we are operating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to add quickly.
I
mean, the last thing that I want, I say something provocative now. The last thing that I want is that the government develops a very complicated program to support us. Yeah.
The last thing you want is that.
Carry on with our life and expand the business. And we have been forced right from the beginning to really keep costs down and be very efficient in what we're doing. So I think we should really focus government programs where it's needed, and I think it's more needed in the sector also that Wiebe referred to.
I'm inclined to agree with you, because the truth is, because in a way, there's a deficit in that the national grid, which should be supplying these people with electricity, is not able to. So in a way to kind of basically placate, I guess, it makes sense that a lot of attention is being given to solar home systems and mini grids where people are able to have electricity aside from the national grid. But that then brings me to the issue of financing, because I do know that, with Christian and Marley's businesses, I know you're operating with corporate, so, them paying for things is more of a, you discuss, you agree on prices, but I do think, because you've invested in companies that are probably running the pay-as-you-go model to have people like the software home systems. A lot of times people go for the pay-as-you-go model because, like as Michael Formeroti did mention in his presentation of the report, a lot of people cannot, access this. In fact, in the report it says almost 50% of Malawians, their reason for they opted not to join the grid because it's too costly. So there's a grid available for some of them, but they're like, yeah, I can't pay for this. So that's a separate issue that we don't discuss as much. So people talk about no access to the grid, but even those that have access, can they pay for it? So how would you say it's been with the pay-as-you-go model? Do you think it's been, effective so far? Do you think there are ways to make this better for people to pay?
Well, no, I mean, definitely, look, so basically the way that a solar home system company has to look at the market is their competition is obviously not the grid. Their competition is a small, beta pass neighbor generator, right? And so it has to come in at a cost that's equivalent to the initial cost of one of those generators, because the typical, especially low-income Nigerian household, doesn't have the luxury of a lot of sort of spare income that they can actually put a big capital investment to start with. And obviously the way that a generator works is it's a smaller startup cost, but then every month there's cost, and it goes on forever. With a solar system, obviously, once you've paid for it, then there's relatively no cost, but you can't pay that up front. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. So the solar home system companies therefore have to use pay as you go. They, you pay a deposit and then you pay for the power monthly or weekly. In some cases, they even do daily. And it has to be at a price point that's below what people are currently paying for diesel. The problem, though, is that it means that these solar home system companies are essentially consumer finance companies. They aren't really power companies. And so that means they have to raise a huge amount of capital because they have to fund all the systems, and they have to bring tens of thousands into the market of these systems before they can sort of be getting enough regular revenue to grow organically without new investments. And so they really need tens of millions of dollars of investment to really get there. So it does put a drag on their potential to grow. And I think it's there's Mobisol, for example, in East Africa that basically, I think, overextended themselves and eventually, had to be basically brought into bankruptcy and that kind of thing. So it's a big problem. And especially if you have a solar home system company with a lot of sort of expensive, overheads in their home, home office in Europe or whatever, then it becomes very financially difficult. So I actually think it's the more homegrown providers that have figured out how to do it in a much more kind of strategic way, getting stuff to the market quickly, bringing in probably lower cost systems, but that are still quality, and without all the expensive overheads. I think those are the ones that will ultimately win the market.
Okay.
But actually, I guess one additional point to that, though, is also the sort of digital payments that happens with these plans are also still relatively expensive if you count it as a percent of the cost. And so the techies out there, if you can figure out how to get us cheaper and lower cost payment platforms that even work in very low bandwidth or no bandwidth environments, that would be brilliant.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's an important point, Ray, because as we talk about financing a renewable energy company, the truth is, I think Christian mentioned this earlier in the conversation, where it's not just about the infrastructure you're bringing, there's also the payments. You need to figure out a way for your people to be able to pay you. So in a pay-as-you-go model, of course, you could decide to do transfers or create an app for payment, but of course, sometimes people don't have access to these things. Sometimes you're talking to people who are unbanked. So that's a very important point. So I think we have some questions in the Q&A box, and I'll just read out some of them. I know some of them have been answered, so we'll leave those, But, okay, so from Ibitamuno Gerald, he says, Wiebe, when would you say is the best time for a startup founder to withdraw personal loans given to the business? Is it wise to do it when financing is received or not at all? I'm not sure. Personal loans. Sorry, we'll be back on here.
Yeah, that's incredibly risky. Especially if the personal loan is from a Nigerian commercial bank, which is then 20 or more percent. That really burdens you and your business, and you have a potentially a very big problem. So I think you need to bootstrap and figure out how to do it without the personal loans.
Thank you. Then there is one here for how do the speakers feel fintech can add value to the off-grid energy sector? I will throw that to Marley. What do you think? Like, how can fintech step in here in terms of helping the off-grid energy sector?
I would say that fintech are already there in the pay-as-you-go model, because you need to have a platform that enable payment via connecting to mobile money and so forth, especially if you want to reach the unbanked people. So it's already there. There's things to improve, and as Wiebe say, I mean, if there are people who can offer services or platform that can work in areas where people don't have a 4G, 3G, or may only have USSD, for instance, that would be great.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Marley. Still on the topic of pay as you go and how financing, I think I'll direct this to Christian. On PayGo, this is from Judd Bauer. On PayGo, to what extent do you see Nigeria's mobile money regulation or the lack of mobile money penetration as a barrier to rapid rural electrification? Of course, there's the Lumos and MTN model where people can pay with the, connected. If you have an MTN line, you can easily make that payment. But do you see this as a problem that can easily be, dealt with, or something that we might need some time?
Yeah, I'm personally, I'm not sure whether I'm qualified to answer this question. I get in principle the problem statement, but could I please refer this question to my friend Wiebe to really maybe have, to have an answer? By the way, Wiebe, I noticed you are very good in typing. Huh? You have answered all 12 questions. I'm always trying to type quickly, but you're always faster.
All right.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so no, that's actually a big hindrance. That has been a big hindrance. The lack of mobile money penetration has been a huge hindrance to the growth of the solar home system sector, but also mini grids, right? And it's actually probably what put Nigeria several years behind East Africa in this sector. Many companies that wanted to, were exploring the market a couple of years ago. Let's say they were in East Africa, were used to M-Pesa and all that. They would come and explore the Nigerian market, and then they would just say, look, without the mobile money that's very deeply penetrated and very low cost, this isn't going to be viable. So it did really slow down the market. And obviously then some innovations were, like the Lumos approach and so on. But it has really hindered the market, and it's something that thankfully is now, being addressed and so on. But we're still a long ways away from the kind of price point and sophistication of that mobile money market as in East Africa.
While we're still on, yes, I see a very interesting question here from Abdusalam Ahmed, where he asks, what are the available options for a mini grid operator to prevent energy theft? Now, this is something I never considered, because I know with the actual, national grid, there is the issue of, I've paid for my lights, but someone else is taking it. So do you have any thoughts on that? I would let that be for everybody to answer. But
so we have 15 mini grid companies in our portfolio. So this is something we deal with. Look, it's actually quite simple. The mini grid company is basically an integrated utility for a particular kind of a village, a community, right? And it can be managed remotely, right? So if there's power theft going on, you notice it quite quickly. And the simplest thing to do is just turn off the whole village and say, find the thief. Nobody ever does it again, trust me.
Okay. That's a very
doesn't happen
interesting
again.
approach.
Yeah.
Marley, do you have any thoughts on this? Not at all. Okay, but because I'd never thought of the possibility of energy theft, but this is something interesting.
Yes, people try, but you can stop it very quickly.
People do.
Yeah.
Okay. And Christian is answering some questions on the Q&A box, so I'm going to let him continue. Let me see what else we have here. Someone asked if you have any idea if there's a publication where they can access details of incentives and grants available for startups in off-grids, home system, and mini grids. Now, of course, there's Wiebe's company all on, but he's answering it now. But yes, I think on the TechCabal report as well has a couple of things that will have on what is being done in the industry and what. Ulwa Shaitan Ulwatosin is asking if, on the matter of theft, if there is any other way to track it other than turning off the grid.
Well, that's just more the way of preventing it from happening a second or third time. I mean, the other way to prevent it, obviously, is, you can shut off or disconnect that particular customer. And then, all of their neighbors and all of their competitor small businesses will have power and they won't. And obviously then they will lose out and they'll hopefully repent and come back.
No, but I do find that a lot of times, what if it's not like, for example, if we all are on this mini grid and we're all paying, but it's not a thing where I gave someone access, they somehow took it, so I feel like that's maybe the question being asked. If I'm being stolen from technically as a person on the grid and someone is stealing from me, if I raise a complaint, what do you think the company would need to do?
Okay, so you're saying someone who is in the community but is not part of the mini grid,
but the theft is happening from someone who is not on because the way I know it to happen with the national grid, I'm paying my bills and my light is available, but someone has connected some wire and is taking from my own electricity. So in that situation, turning off my light doesn't do much to them. If my light comes back on, they still have access to take it.
Yeah, well,
so it's actually it's an interesting.
Yeah, so remember, in these typical mini grid communities, every single house and business has its own smart meter, right? So everyone is a customer, and so if there's one customer that is just seems to be using so much power, and then let's say their neighbor is not using any, but they're also on, someone will notice that pretty quickly.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, because all of this is monitored, right? You'll say, wait, why is this particular customer, running out of what they're paying for so quickly, and why is their next door neighbor never buying? And so these are things that, again, remember, this is all it's all done very smartly. You know exactly which household is using what amount, how much they're paying, their paying patterns, their use patterns. Same with the small businesses. It's all done on smart meters, so you can actually figure this out. And even that technology is getting smarter and smarter even as we go along. There's even now new new systems where instead of even needing a whole mini grid, you actually have technology where like a couple of households within a community can say, okay, we just want the panels on our houses, we're going to pay for this, and then we're going to sell power to our neighbors. So even that is becoming possible. So instead of your neighbor stealing from you, you're selling to them. So
okay.
It's not.
I do want to. Sorry, no, I was going to ask that. Tell people that we'll be launching a poll soon, on the topic. So please, respond to the poll, and of course, just to help us get a sense of how this has been going. And the poll is up now. So just answer that, and so we can get a sense of what your thoughts are and what we're doing so far. In the meantime, there is a question in the answer part where I think Wiebe said this one is big grammar. This is from Sonia Nelson, where she asked, do the speakers see the possibility of blockchain and DeFi playing a role in the financing deficit? Now, not an industry leader or anything, but I know blockchain is still a bit complicated. So far, we typically use it for crypto in the space we are in now, but there are many applications for it. But I do want to know if any of the speakers have any thoughts on how blockchain might help us in any way. Christian or Mari?
Okay, so okay, maybe then I give it a first go. Look, I never really understood what blockchain is. Yeah, so therefore, I think saying the application of it, I think blockchain, I can think of some very practical application of it, and I would like to give you one example. So we as a company, we really struggle with, as I said earlier, with having to open bank accounts, for instance, with various banks. So I think we have like with 10 different banks, about 12 different banks account, because our clients are paying us on there. Likewise, we need to onboard quite a number of clients, and all of this requires a huge KYC process. So like a very practical application for me would be if one would bring a solution that exists in Europe or Middle East to Nigeria, where we can really have a blockchain-based KYC technology, where we can use one KYC file on a blockchain basis and just, share this with the different banks, respectively, our clients share this with us. So it's a huge administrative effort. If it goes to kind of blockchain as in kind of payment ideas, well, I'm not so sure. You know, in our case, payment is not such a big deal because we have like corporate customers, yeah. And I'm not sure whether our payment processes would be better if just the currency is different. I think in the end of the day, we are looking forward to timely transfers, and I think our clients are managing this every day very well. So I would more think in this direction for more innovative solutions.
Okay, there's a question here that I feel like I could direct to Mali, because I know you run something currently with a university in Rwanda, I think, and this person says, I'm a student. Do you know of any energy companies offering internships or graduate scheme jobs? Now, I think I'll put that to everybody, but I'll start with Mali. What do you know of that could be? This person hasn't specified where they are, but just in general. You know,
look, it would be great. It would be
programs?
great to know where they're based, because I mean,
where they're from. I would actually would like to know as well. I think
that would be great
if they can say. But okay, Wiebe, do you know of any, just in case this person is
in Nigeria?
You know, in Nigeria.
Yeah. So there's a program that's actually now it's been piloted at least once, and it's going to start being rolled out. It's the Energy Training Company. They're sort of using an Andela type. Actually, the founder is ex-Andela, so they're using like an Andela model for the solar space. And so what they do is they provide a mostly online training program with some sort of physical presence for some of the specializations. And then if someone who's taking the course can't afford it, they pay like a 5,000 naira deposit, and then afterwards they get placed in a job, and then they have to kind of they have to basically pay from their salary for like the first year, something like that, to pay for the cost of the course. So it's slightly different. It's not quite this. It's not quite an internship, but it's a training and then job placement. There was also a program that the REA was doing, which was working with all of the universities that they had basically put in place the solar and gas to power, generation for the campuses. That then they also had a STEM program for female students who are in their final 2 years, who could then have an internship with the company that was managing that solar or gas system on their campus. It was kind of really kicking off in 2018 and 2019, and then I think because of COVID it sort of it didn't continue last year. So we're waiting to see if it continues again. So there is some of that in Nigeria, probably not enough yet, but it is something to look out for. So either the Energy Training Company, or the REA STEM program for women in engineering and other similar fields.
So the person says they are in Nigeria. So yeah, the REA or the
ETC.
What's it called?
Energy Training
ETC,
Company.
The Energy Training Company. Yes. So please check that out. I do want Mali to talk about the program you currently have, so that we're talking to a mostly African audience, so people can see what ways this can be probably replicated. Like Wiebe mentioned, we need as many of these kinds of programs as possible. So
look, I mean, we're starting something similar to what Vivi mentioned in Nigeria. We're doing this in Rwanda, where we have a partnership with a local university called IPRC. So basically, the plan is to have students that will be trained on using the regeneration machine, and we want them also to be part. I mean, we will enroll them as active trainee within the company, so they can get some more experience and then be able to be fully employed in the near future, because what we are doing is pretty new in the market and pretty innovative. So that's the plan. We also want to involve female students, and as you know, the COVID restriction has slowed down a lot of things, especially in Rwanda, where the lockdown has been pretty strict, meaning the school was closed for quite some time. So we we hope to be able to revive all those initiatives. But really, what we believe in is training students and making sure that we don't have to fly in people from Europe or wherever else to do the job.
Yeah, and maybe I can only add here briefly that we have, look, first of all, I happen to be born in Germany, but just to be clear, there were other 108 people in our company. So Jasper and me, both German passport holder, are from Nigeria, Senegal, and Ghana. And I can only say that's a great idea, because if I look through the last years of my little entrepreneurial experience, like 80% of all recruiting mistakes had actually German passports. Yeah. So I just want to say we have had really great experience in hiring. And what we did there was to, for instance, recently launch a trainee program specifically for female engineers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to bring them on board and to train them up. And frankly, our head of project implementation, so he's basically in charge of rolling out all systems in one way or the other with his team. So he was our first employee. When he came to us, he was a very, very good electrical engineer. And for sure, he had never done any solar. Yeah. So he had done something totally different before. So, and I think that the training journey, and frankly, the training and learning journey that we did together brought him now in overseeing a fairly large team of engineers. I just wanted to say also to become a little bit more practical. So we are, for instance, interested in interns. So when somebody asks here, so would some of the companies offer internship? Definitely. So obviously we have limited capacity, but we had great experience. We're launching again another trainee program for young engineers. We need people with analytical skills all the time. So there are great opportunities in our, and I'm sure also the other companies to find an entry into the industry.
And one thing I wanted to add, sorry, I wanted to add one thing about the training aspect. I mean, even if you're not coming from the engineering sector or electricity sector like I was, I mean, it's important to build your own expertise, and you have there's a lot of online classes that you can take for free, and this is what I've done basically to understand more about solar energy, renewable energy in general. So what I want to say to the people, the participants today is that be curious and don't be afraid to look at all the courses that are available online to make sure that you get the basics and also try to see in locally who of which company offer local training and I mean and so forth. It's a matter of being curious and go and just be a go-getter.
All right. So from the polls, the results of the poll, we had 68 people voted, and a huge, the largest number of people talked about their biggest challenge building their energy company has been funding. And so that related to a question someone asked about what kinds of companies can they get what investment firms in Africa are funding solar startups. So I know for solar startups in Nigeria, Orlon is currently, according to Wiebe's answered them, he said Orlon is currently the only one in Nigeria funding solar startups. But I would like to hear if Christian or Mali know of any other investment firms, whether in Africa or outside, that are interested in funding companies like this in the country. Or on the continents, to be more exact.
Yeah, maybe I can give a first go, and then Wiebe, please fill in, particularly on this earlier stage funding that you, I believe, have a much better overview. But I can say, like, look, in the either as investors or with people that we have discussed, I would say the vast majority of, for instance, European development finance institutions are interested in that. So I can testify this as in our recent equity fundraising that was led by IFU, the Danish development fund. These are absolutely great people. We absolutely love them, and they have led a consortium with Proparco, that's a French STOA, that's a French investment fund, and Morgan Stanley with a special investment from their special investment arm. But previously, because I think we should mention that, our Series A was with Verot Capital, which is a Nigerian-based private equity firm who is funded then again locally and from overseas DFIs. So, and you know, honestly, they have been really great because we were in a much earlier stage, and perhaps because they understood the market a bit better, they were also very right for us at that stage. But beyond that, I can really say like basically everybody else, like FinFund, CDC, or maybe other development funds, we recently have the impression that the Americans, with the new president being on board, have a kind of increased awareness of climate change and interest in investments. So that's DFC. They're rebranded from OPIC to DFC. And then there are also European Union funds. But I would say maybe Wiebe, I don't know if you want to add again, because I think that was very valuable how you explained this earlier stage funding, what possibilities there are.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you define a startup, right? I mean, so like a startup that is really at a very basic level, you know, in any, like I said before, in any sector, you won't get bank finance. And then even the DFIs and so on that Christian is talking about, I mean, their ticket size is usually at the bare minimum $5 million, right? So you have to be, you know, a decent sized company before you can even get into their conversations. So and you know, and even in Nigeria, I guess Bank of Industry has done some of this, and they actually were doing it quite early. I mean, 5-6 years ago, before anyone else was talking about renewables and off grid, Bank of Industry was providing funding to the companies like GVE, Arnergy, that you know today. Although it seems like they've slowed that down, and then you know, there may be a bit of one-offs here and there. And then there's the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, which I mentioned, and they do grants, but again, through a program in collaboration with All On. So that there really isn't that much for that kind of startup early stage ecosystem. You really need to get to a point where you're at a slightly larger company before you can access a lot of these funds. And that's simply because, look, the amount of energy it takes and time it takes to do a $50,000 deal is basically the same as it takes to do a $10 million deal. And so, you know, the typical fund just doesn't have the capacity to do that earlier stage deal. And so they may be trying to work through, you know, sort of a aggregation platform or something like that. But the kind of direct funding to these early stage companies is just not there. So again, you have to go to friends and families. Maybe the Lagos Angel Network is an option. And then All On, but it's not, again, it's the same for basically every sector. There's not that much out there.
Okay, thank you very much, Wiebe. I think this has been, you know, these are great questions. I know some are currently being answered by Mali and Wiebe and Christian. So please, you know, we're rounding up now. So I would like to ask, you know, each of our guests to just give us, you know, your closing remarks. What would you like attendees to go away with? What's I know, like, we're all, of course, we're here because we're hopeful about the future of energy, renewable energy in Africa. But, you know, what are your thoughts on what that's looking like and what we need to do as people?
I'll just chip in on Wiebe, what Wiebe just said. I don't want entrepreneur and people who really want to get into renewable energy to be hopeless about the funding aspect. So you can always find workarounds and be a little bit creative. And this is why, I mean, the way we've been doing it with BRT is that we decided to partner with local company, with established people, people who already have an energy company, who understand the business, and you can come to them and say, guys, this is the idea that we have. Let's partner, let's work hand in hand, give us some space, or let's try to see how we can move forward together. Because once you have the support of someone who's already established, you will have the possibility, first of all, to understand how to run a bigger company. They will be able to advise you. And another, it's a kind of mentoring, but it will help you to grow progressively and use somehow their resources to grow your ID. So this is why it's important to understand your local market and also be a go-getter. Just go and pitch to people, even if you have to pitch to 100 of people and you will be able to convince 2 or 3. Those guys can mentor you, and I do believe that. I mean, I'm the kind of person who exchanging, partnering, you always learn from that. So I really want the attendees to understand that it's not about the money. Yes, I know it's important to get the business funded, but you need to be creative and don't give up.
Thank you, Mark. Wiebe, any final thoughts?
Yes. Okay. So, in Nigeria, there are over 20 million diesel and petrol generators that are operating every day. Nigerians spend about $12 billion a year on operating these generators. And the total sort of investment that would be needed to kind of bring the Nigerian power space sector up to where it can deliver, the amount of power that is needed for basic development is about a $200 billion investment. So this is a massive, 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 massive industry. So all of you out there, I know it sounds like it's difficult to get that initial funding, but with a bit of ingenuity and with coming in with the innovation, and again, you got to look at this space not as a power sector, but as consumer finance, as fintech, as about metering and just remote monitoring and all of this, which is actually technology. It's not really sort of electricity, so to speak. Figure out where your niche can be, and come into this sector and contribute, because we need everybody here. There are companies like All On that can invest. There are companies like Christians that are probably always looking for better solutions to what they're doing now, and they are again part of the ecosystem. They may not be investors, but they could be your customers, right? As you build these platforms, and there is no reason why in the next 5 to 10 years Nigeria is not going to have a number of sort of off-grid billionaires. I think I know who a few of them are. I think we've invested in a few of them, but I hope more of you are out there. And so again, find your niche and play in this space. You guys are probably a lot smarter than any of us in the industry. So use that and come into it and contribute and solve the power problem and make a lot of money doing it.
Christian, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I always thought about our business as 3 things. Actually understanding what clients really require, understanding the technology, and getting money to implement that technology. And around these 3 pillars, it becomes clear that it's not technology only. And then I would say it is true, the market is so big. That's why I would always say, for us as Daystar Power, it's by far too early to declare victory. Yeah, because we haven't even started. We'd like in from 1 to 100, maybe we are on a 5, but we're definitely not on a 50. Not on a 30. So we are somewhere at the beginning because the market is so big. And then the one thing that I would encourage is to also look at this a bit regionally, to think about solutions. So something that I'm sure TechCabal is discussing all the time, what's the scalability of a good product? As much as it is relevant in Nigeria, it's relevant also in the other ECOWAS country in which we are operating. So I think, therefore, think about it as a bigger play in which it's around financing, client relationship, as well as the technology, and realize that that market is really big, not only in Nigeria, but also in the rest of West Africa. And then good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the luck will be needed because, like you said, we're trying to build an ecosystem. It's necessary that more people come into the industry and like we said, become billionaires and help people as well. So thank you all very much. Please fill out how we can improve. And for our next TechCabal Live, that will be on the 21st of May. I think Daniel has put the links to register for that in the chat. We'll be having our speakers from the CEO of Kuda Bank, Babs Ogundei, the MD of Branch International, Diallo Ademola, and co-founder and CEO of Verify Me, Esige Aguele. They'll be talking on how seamless customer onboarding is transforming the growth of fintech in Nigeria. So again, the link is there to register. Just before we go, TC Insights is the arm of TechCabal that is providing actionable insights, helping you get the best data, research, and intelligence on everything you need to know about the tech ecosystem and, of course, the tech industry at large. You can contact via email tcinsights@bigcabal.com. And of course, visit the website techcabal.com/tcinsights. You can also follow on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. And then, of course, TechCabal, we have all the best news and everything that's happening on the tech ecosystem in Africa. So please go to the website, read up on what's happening around you. And of course, if you want us to just deliver that straight to you, sign up for our newsletter, TC Daily, every morning at 7. You get it in your inbox. And of course, you keep yourself updated on what's happening in the industry around you. Again, thank you to the panelists, Mali, Wiebe, Christian. We had an amazing conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining today. Until next time, please sign up for the next event and see you later. Bye.